On what should have been the happiest day of his life, Jerome Williams stood in the center of a reception hall with blood on his knuckles and rage in his eyes. Around him, tables were overturned. Glass littered the floor like diamonds scattered across a battlefield. The woman he'd promised forever to was nowhere to be found. And her family, uncles, cousins, her own father, lay sprawling across chairs and against walls, stunned by what had just unfolded. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not today. Not ever. But when a man discovers that everything he believed was built on lies, when the foundation of his future crumbles in a single moment, sometimes the only response that makes sense is the one that makes no sense at all. What you're about to hear isn't just a story about a wedding gone wrong. It's about secrets kept in the name of protection, about love tested by deception, and about how the truth, no matter how painful, will always find its way to the surface. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Detroit, Michigan. Spring of 2024. A city where old traditions still hold weight in tight-knit communities, where family names carry history, and where a handshake can mean more than any contract. Jerome Williams was 29 years old, a project manager at a construction firm, known for being steady, reliable. The kind of man who showed up early and stayed late. He wasn't flashy, didn't chase attention, but he had something that mattered more. He had integrity. Nia Patterson was 26, a nurse at Henry Ford Hospital, beloved by patients and co-workers alike. She had one of those smiles that could calm a room, the kind of presence that made people feel seen. She came from the Patterson family, well known in their community, respected, connected. Their love story seemed simple. They met through mutual friends at a cookout 2 years prior. Started talking. Started laughing. Started building something real. But in families like theirs, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Because behind closed doors, behind Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings, the Pattersons carried something heavy. Something that had been passed down through generations like an heirloom no one wanted but everyone felt obligated to protect. And Jerome? He had no idea. To understand what happened on that April afternoon, you have to understand where it all began. Not with Jerome and Nia, but with decisions made long before they ever met. Nia's father, Robert Patterson, was a man of principle. At least that's what everyone said. He ran a small trucking business, employed people from the neighborhood, gave second chances to those who needed them. He was the kind of man who believed in doing things the right way, even when the right way was the hard way. But 20 years earlier, Robert had made a choice that would echo through his family like thunder before a storm. In the late 90s, Robert's business was failing. He'd overextended, taken on too much debt, trusted the wrong partners. He was weeks away from losing everything: the trucks, the warehouse, his reputation. He had 3 young daughters at home and a wife who believed in him even when he'd stopped believing in himself. That's when Vincent Carver made him an offer. Vincent was a businessman, old school, the type who still wore suits to breakfast and kept his word like it was scripture. He had money, connections, and a long memory. He offered Robert a loan, $50,000, no interest, no contract. Just a promise between men. But Vincent didn't want money back. He wanted something else. He wanted a daughter. Not literally, of course. But in the way these things used to be done, Vincent wanted assurance that when the time came, when his own son Darius was old enough, Robert's eldest daughter would be introduced to him. Not forced, Vincent had said. Just given the opportunity. A chance for the families to unite, to strengthen bonds, to honor the debt that had saved Robert's livelihood. Robert agreed. He had no choice. Or at least that's what he told himself. Nia was only 6 years old then. She knew nothing of agreements made over cigars and handshakes, nothing of the weight her future would carry. And for years it didn't matter. Vincent's son Darius moved to Atlanta for college, started a business there, built a life. The debt seemed forgotten, a relic of another time. Until it wasn't. 2 years ago, right around the time Nia met Jerome, Darius Carver came back to Detroit. He was successful now, polished, ambitious. And Vincent hadn't forgotten. He reminded Robert of what was owed, of the promise made when Robert had nothing. Robert tried to explain that times had changed, that his daughter was her own woman, that she'd met someone. But Vincent was old school. A promise was a promise. And if Robert valued his honor, he'd make sure Darius at least had a chance. So Robert did what so many parents do when they're caught between love and obligation. He said nothing. He smiled at Jerome during family dinners, welcomed him into their home, watched his daughter fall deeper in love, and hoped that somehow, someway the past would stay buried. But the past never stays buried. April 13, 2024. The day everything fell apart. The wedding was held at the Belle Isle Boathouse, overlooking the Detroit River. It was perfect. Spring flowers, natural light streaming through tall windows, 200 guests dressed in their finest. Nia wore her grandmother's pearls. Jerome wore a suit he'd saved 6 months to buy. The ceremony was supposed to start at 3 o'clock. At 2:30, everything was still on track. The DJ was setting up, caterers were arranging tables, bridesmaids were taking photos. Jerome stood in a side room with his best man, adjusting his tie for the 100th time, trying to calm the nerves that had nothing to do with doubt and everything to do with knowing his life was about to change in the best possible way. That's when Nia's younger sister, Shayla, knocked on the door. She looked panicked. Her makeup was smudged like she'd been crying. She handed Jerome a folded piece of paper and said, "You need to read this. Now." Jerome unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, rushed. Jerome, I'm so sorry. There's something you don't know. Something my family kept from both of us. I can't do this to you. I can't let you walk into this blind. Meet me outside. Please. Before it's too late. His heart dropped. He didn't think. He just moved. He walked through the venue, past guests who were starting to arrive, past his own mother who tried to stop him, asking what was wrong. He pushed open the side exit and found Nia standing by the water, still in her dress, mascara streaking down her face. What's going on? Jerome asked, his voice tight. Nia looked at him like she was seeing him for the last time. My father made a promise. A long time ago. Before I even knew you existed. She told him everything. About the debt. About Vincent Carver. About Darius. About how her father had been pressuring her for months to at least meet with Darius, to consider what it would mean for the family if she didn't honor the old agreement. I told him no, Nia said, her voice breaking. I told him I was marrying you. But this morning, Darius showed up at the house. He said he was coming to the wedding. He said he just wanted to pay his respects, but Jerome, I saw the way my father looked at him. Like he still owes him something. Like I'm still part of a deal. Jerome felt something crack inside him. Not heartbreak. Not yet. Something colder. Anger. The kind that starts quiet and builds. Where is he? Jerome asked. Jerome, don't. Where is your father? Nia grabbed his arm, but he pulled away. He walked back inside, his jaw clenched, his mind racing. He found Robert Patterson near the entrance, greeting guests, shaking hands, playing the proud father. Jerome didn't yell. He didn't make a scene. Not yet. He walked up to Robert and said, quiet enough that only they could hear, we need to talk. Now. Robert's face went pale. He nodded and followed Jerome into a back hallway, away from the crowd. Did you promise her to another man? Jerome asked. Robert opened his mouth, closed it. Finally he said, it's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. It was business. It was survival. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice, Jerome said. And you chose to lie to me. To her. For how long? How long were you going to let me think everything was real? It is real, Robert said, his voice rising. She loves you. That's why we're here. Then why is Darius Carver in this building right now? Robert said nothing. And that silence? That was the confirmation Jerome needed. He turned to leave, but Robert grabbed his shoulder. Don't do this. Don't ruin this day. Jerome spun around. I didn't ruin anything. You did. That's when Nia's uncle Michael stepped into the hallway. He'd heard the raised voices. Everything okay here? Stay out of this, Jerome said. But Michael didn't. He stepped between them, put a hand on Jerome's chest. You need to calm down. Jerome looked at that hand. Looked at Michael. Looked at Robert. And something inside him snapped. He shoved Michael back. Art. Michael stumbled, caught himself, and came forward swinging. What happened next happened fast. Too fast for anyone to stop it. Jerome blocked the punch, countered, and within seconds, 3 more of Nia's relatives rushed in. They didn't ask questions. They just saw one of their own being hit and responded the only way they knew how. But Jerome wasn't backing down. He fought like a man who'd been betrayed, like a man who'd spent 2 years building a future only to discover it was all constructed on sand. He fought all of them, uncle, cousins, even Robert himself when he tried to intervene. Guests poured into the hallway. Screaming. Chaos. Someone called the police. And Nia? She stood in the doorway, watching the man she loved destroy her family, knowing it was her fault, knowing she should have told him sooner, knowing that love alone was never going to be enough to fix this. If you're still with us, drop a comment below and let us know. Have you ever discovered a secret that changed everything? We read every single one. The police arrived within 10 minutes. By then the fight was over. Jerome sat on the ground outside, hands zip-tied behind his back, blood dripping from a cut above his eye. 3 of Nia's family members were being treated by paramedics. The wedding was cancelled. Guests dispersed in stunned silence, whispering, recording videos on their phones that would be shared across social media within the hour. Nia was gone. No one knew where. She'd left her bouquet on a table, her veil crumpled on the floor, and walked out without a word to anyone. Jerome was taken to the police station. He was questioned for hours. He didn't deny what he'd done. He explained why. The officers listened, exchanged glances, and ultimately decided not to press charges. Nia's family didn't want to pursue it either. They just wanted it to be over. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Jerome went home that night to an empty apartment. The apartment he and Nia were supposed to move into together the following week. He sat on the floor, still in his torn suit, and stared at the wall until the sun came up. He didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't cry. He just replayed every moment, every conversation, every time Nia had seemed distant or distracted, and wondered how he'd missed it. How he'd been so blind. The next day he tried calling her. She didn't answer. He texted. Nothing. He drove to her parents' house, but no one came to the door. For 3 days Jerome heard nothing. And then on the 4th day a letter arrived. It was handwritten in Nia's careful script, and it started with 2 words that made his chest tighten. "I'm sorry." She explained everything again in more detail this time. She told him about the pressure from her father, about the guilt she'd carried, about how she tried to find a way to tell him but never found the right moment. She told him she loved him, that she'd always loved him. But she couldn't ask him to forgive what her family had done. She couldn't ask him to build a life on a foundation that had already cracked. She ended the letter with a line that broke him. "You deserve someone whose past doesn't haunt your future." Jerome read it 5 times. Then he folded it, put it in a drawer, and didn't open it again for weeks. But the story didn't end there. Because while Jerome was trying to piece himself back together, something else was happening. Something neither he nor Nia could have predicted. Vincent Carver, the man whose loan had started everything, heard about the wedding, about the fight, about the chaos, and he was furious. Not at Jerome, at Robert. Because in Vincent's eyes, Robert had failed to honor the agreement. He'd allowed his daughter to choose someone else, to publicly reject the Carver family, and in doing so, had humiliated Vincent in front of the very community where respect was currency. Vincent wanted restitution. And if Robert couldn't deliver his daughter, he'd take something else. The business. Within 2 weeks, Vincent called in every favor, every connection, every old debt. He made sure that Robert's trucking company lost contracts. Drivers quit. Clients pulled out. Robert tried to fight it, tried to explain, but in circles like theirs, reputation is everything. And once it's damaged, it's almost impossible to repair. Robert lost everything. Again. And this time there was no one to bail him out. Nia found out through her mother, who called her in tears, begging her to come home. Nia had been staying with a friend, trying to figure out what to do next, how to move forward. But hearing her mother's voice, hearing the desperation, she knew she couldn't hide anymore. She went home. And what she found there broke her. Her father, the man who'd always stood tall, who'd always had answers, sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. The house was quiet. Too quiet. "This is my fault," Robert said when he saw her. "All of it. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I could just manage it, just keep everyone happy, it would work out. But I made it worse. I made everything worse." Nia sat across from him. She didn't know what to say. Part of her was angry. Part of her was heartbroken. But most of her just felt tired. "What do we do now?" she asked. Robert looked at her, and for the first time in her life, she saw her father as he truly was. Not strong, not unshakable, but human. Flawed. Afraid. "I don't know," he admitted. 3 weeks after the wedding that never was, Nia did something she swore she'd never do. She reached out to Darius Carver. Not because she wanted to. Not because she thought it would fix anything. But because she needed to understand. She needed to hear from him directly what he thought this was, what he expected, what his father had told him. They met at a coffee shop in Midtown. Neutral ground. Public. Darius was exactly as she remembered from the few times she'd seen him growing up. Polished, confident, composed. He didn't look like someone who'd just ruined multiple lives. He looked like someone who'd simply followed through on a business arrangement. "I didn't want this," were the first words out of his mouth. Nia blinked. "What?" "I didn't want any of this," Darius repeated. He looked tired. "I know what you think. I know what everyone thinks. But I need you to know, I told my father this was a bad idea. I told him times have changed. But he doesn't see it that way. To him, honor and obligation are everything. So why didn't you just say no? Nia asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Because I owe him everything, Darius said quietly. He built his life around making sure I had opportunities he never did. And when he asked me to do this one thing, to just show up, to make an appearance, I couldn't say no. But I never expected it to go this far. I never wanted your father to lose his business. I never wanted you to lose your future. Nia stared at him. Then why is this still happening? Darius leaned back, ran a hand over his face. Because my father is old school. He doesn't see this as cruelty. He sees it as justice. In his mind, your father broke a promise. And promises have consequences. So what now? Nia asked. He destroys my family? For what? Pride. Darius was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, what if I could stop it? Nia's heart skipped. How? I'm my father's only son. If I tell him I'm not interested, that I've moved on, that I don't want this, he'll listen. It might take time, but he'll listen. And would you? Nia asked. Would you tell him that? Darius looked at her, really looked at her, and said, I already have someone. I've been seeing someone for over a year. I never told my father because I knew it would complicate things. But if it means ending this, I'll tell him. I'll make it clear that there's no future here, that you and I were never going to happen. Nia felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief exactly, but hope. A small, fragile hope. Why are you doing this? She asked. Darius smiled sadly. Because I know what it's like to love someone and feel like the whole world is working against you. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone. How would you feel if you were in Nia's position? Let us know in the comments. Darius kept his word. He sat down with his father and told him everything. About the woman he'd been seeing, about his plans to propose, about how he never wanted to be part of an arranged introduction in the first place. Vincent was furious. For days he didn't speak to his son. But eventually, as the anger cooled, something else took its place. Understanding. Not agreement, but understanding. Vincent called off his vendetta against Robert's business. Slowly, quietly, contracts started coming back. Drivers returned. The company stabilized. But the damage had been done. Robert would never look at his business the same way. He'd never look at himself the same way. And Nia? She still hadn't spoken to Jerome. She wanted to. Every day she thought about calling, about showing up at his door, about trying to explain everything that had happened since that awful afternoon. But every time she reached for her phone, she stopped. Because what could she possibly say that would make any of it okay? Then 6 weeks after the wedding, Jerome called her. She almost didn't answer. Her hand hovered over the phone, shaking. But on the last ring she picked up. Hi, Jerome said. His voice sounded different. Quieter. Steadier. Hi, Nia whispered. There was a long silence. Not uncomfortable. Just heavy. I read your letter, Jerome finally said. About 100 times. Nia closed her eyes. Jerome, Let me finish, he said gently. I read it and I was angry. I was hurt. I felt betrayed. And for a while, I convinced myself that I'd never forgive you. That I couldn't. Nia's throat tightened. But then I realized something, Jerome continued. You didn't betray me. Your father did. The situation did. And you were just trying to survive it. Just like I was. Tears streamed down Nia's face. I'm not saying everything's okay, Jerome said. I'm not saying we just go back to how things were. But I am saying, I don't want to lose you. Not like this. Not over something neither of us had control over. I don't want to lose you either, Nia said, her voice breaking. Then let's figure it out, Jerome said. Together. The way we should have from the beginning. They met the next day. At Belle Isle, near the water where it all fell apart. They talked for hours. About everything. About the secrets, the pressure, the fear. About what love means when it's tested. About whether trust can be rebuilt once it's been shattered. It wasn't easy. Some conversations ended in tears. Some ended in silence. But they kept showing up. Kept trying. And slowly, piece by piece, they started to heal. 3 months later, they moved into an apartment together. This time there was no ceremony. Just two people choosing each other, every single day, knowing that love isn't just about the vows you make. It's about the work you do to keep them. Jerome never forgot what happened that day. Neither did Nia. But they learned something that most people never do. That sometimes, the worst moments reveal who you really are. And if you're brave enough to face it, to own it, to grow from it, Those moments can become the foundation for something stronger than you ever imagined. Robert Patterson eventually apologized to Jerome. It took him a long time to find the words, but when he did, they were genuine. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just said he was sorry. And Jerome, after a long pause, said thank you. Because sometimes that's all you can do. Vincent Carver attended Darius's wedding a year later. He walked his son down the aisle, shook hands with the bride's family, and by all accounts, seemed genuinely happy. He never spoke about the Patterson situation again. But those who knew him said he seemed different afterward. A little softer. A little more willing to let go. So here's the question we want to leave you with. What would you have done? If you were Jerome, standing in that hallway, realizing that everything you believed was built on a lie, would you have walked away? Would you have fought? Would you have tried to forgive? If you were Nia, caught between the man you loved and the family that raised you, would you have told the truth sooner? Would you have run? Would you have stayed and fought for both? And if you were Robert, a father trying to protect his family while honoring an old debt, where do you draw the line between obligation and love? These aren't easy questions. And there aren't easy answers. But that's what makes stories like this so powerful. They remind us that life is complicated. That people are complicated. That love, real love, isn't about perfect moments. It's about imperfect people choosing to show up for each other, even when everything is falling apart. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you feel something, leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us your thoughts. We read every single one, and your words help us keep telling stories that matter. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Because next week we're bringing you another story. Trust us. You won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, the truth always comes out. The question is, will you be ready when it does?